Hello there, I'm Edward from Littledata, and in today's live stream we're going to recap a presentation I gave last week at our agency summit in Barcelona. It's really about the where we've got to with web tracking, and I think it'll help you to understand a bit about Littledata's product and product direction. So without further ado, let me take you back to last week. So once upon a time, in an internet far ago, there was a little man in a basement in Seattle who was experimenting with a way to sell books online that would eventually become Amazon. And there was another man called Peter in California who was experimenting with a way of tracking what happened on web pages. The internet was just taking off. An urchin here was the first way of tracking what customers were actually doing on the website. And it goes, it evolved over time, but in the beginning it was just really a way of tracking the hits to the server. So just actually how many server requests had been filled. But then the breakthrough came in 2001 where they developed a JavaScript snippet. So this is what we now understand to be a tracking script or a tag that sits on the website. And this would then ping back to the server and say, hey, this page is web page that's been read. There's a page view here. And from then tracking page views, they evolved that JavaScript into tracking e-commerce events, tracking purchases, tracking other events. So that's really the birth of modern web tracking was Urchin, and I would say that goes back to 2001, really. Now, ad blockers have been around for a long time, actually probably since 2001 as well. But in 2005, where they started to get very popular, and in certain countries they remain very popular today in certain communities. So they're very popular in Central Europe and certainly among the sort of tech community. But we'll come on to more about ad blockers are a problem. So in 2005, Google bought Urchin and they rebranded it as Google Analytics. And in 2006, Google Analytics was born. And really, it was the same basic technology. Nothing changed about the way they tracked the product, but obviously they improved the user interface and rebranded it as Google. So that's the start of Google Analytics. And obviously made it free was the key innovation Google brought to it. So then actually in 2013, skipping forward nearly 7 years, although Facebook started back in 2006, 2005 actually, they launched the Facebook Pixel. So up until that period, and that may seem weird for those who are heavily into meta marketing now, but they had no way of tracking the actual ads and obviously you just paid per click, but you didn't really know whether that was an action or an acquisition. So there was no sort of sense of CPA before that. And Facebook unashamedly copied what Google had proved to work with Google Analytics, and a lot of the actual tracking code there was lifted or copied directly from Google Analytics. So really the same thing, but just obviously sending Facebook now the details about both the page views, but also the conversions and purchases. And then around 2013 as well, Shopify launched Shopify Analytics because they saw that with its growing merchant base, particularly as they got larger merchants, they were going to need to have some basic understanding of where the sales were coming from, how many online sessions they're getting. Now, Shopify Analytics has evolved quite a bit, although you probably see the user interface is fairly similar. It was never really designed to be a complete replacement for Facebook's own reporting or Google's own reporting. And I still believe it's not a suitable tool for brands to use for marketing attribution. And in 2016, with a very different logo, Littledata started to work with brands mainly in the UK, helping them to set up the tracking and understand how their analytics was working. So this is before we launched the Shopify app in 2018. And we called it back then Web Analytics Without the Tier. Suddenly it's always been a tricky problem to solve. And with the Shopify app now, we're solving it in quite a different way. So 2017, we were working with a whole range of different companies, large retailers, a few Shopify brands, but also non-profits and other SaaS companies. And then in 2018, this was when we pioneered the idea of server-side tracking on Shopify. So we were the first app to do server-side tracking for Shopify. We're the first app to attribute recurring orders back to marketing channels and marketing campaigns. And then a bit later in 2021, the first app to support headless and hydrogen. Now, in 2020, and sorry for my long history, we'll get to the crux of this soon. iOS 14 rolled out. Now, iOS 14 was the first version of Apple's software to include their app intelligent tracking prevention (ITP). So this is a bit different to the app tracking transparency (ATT), which obviously stopped the advertising within mobile apps. What really hurt Facebook and now Meta is the fact that they stopped the ability to track so well private browsers were open. Basically, lots of tricks that have been used previously to link together a session with a previous device were closed. Apple's basic worldview is still the same today, which is that you don't, even if you haven't explicitly said you don't want to be tracked, as a user, they're trying to make it privacy first and actually protect you from tracking, even if you didn't request to opt out. And that disrupted a lot of advertising. It actually led to a big drop in Meta's share price because no longer could you have such confidence in the revenue attribution within Facebook ads. So in 2021, Google Analytics 4 was launched. It had been in the works for a couple of years before that, but they decided it was time, going back to 2005, they hadn't really had a complete rebuild for that whole period. And obviously a lot of the tech was now aging. And so they rebuilt a product that is from the ground up new. The user interface looks very similar, but all the rest of the data collection infrastructure is very different. And Littledata obviously was one of the first apps to support that. And then in 2023, now we've rolled forward a few more iOS releases, and now we're getting to iOS 17. 18 will be out this year. In iOS 17, they started to take action against actually link tracking. So the fact that various marketing platforms, including email tools like Klaviyo, are adding basically a click ID to the link, and that enables them to track back to an individual user. So Apple doesn't have a problem with tracking a anonymous UTM parameter or something. That's fine. There's no way that UTMs are going to go away as a means of tracking marketing attribution. What they're trying to target is the ability to for a marketing platform to actually link back the click to an individual user, and therefore they've started to strip these out at the beginning, just for kind of Google, Meta being big advertising businesses. But I think eventually this will roll out for more marketing platforms. Anyone that have got a sort of click ID, a G-Cleared or a FBC in the link or similar. So one of the things that disrupted was the auto tagging in Google Ads, because I said the G-Cleared identifier in the URL allows Google to know which campaign it came from, even if the UTM tagging is not set up. So one of the things we say is, look, even if you were not doing UTM tagging before, which is obviously not best practice, you need to, because auto tagging is not going to be reliable for Safari and iOS browsers. Now, so that's the history. But my belief is that we are going to see cookies forever or similar things. And I'm a big, not, I was going to say booster for cookies. That's a bit strong. What I believe strongly against is that this whole view of cookieless and this idea that we're moving to a cookieless future. That may be true in a trivial sense, it's certainly true for third-party cookies. But overall, what we still need is the ability to link actual browser session, what's happened in the browser, with what happens, when they purchase. So, true or false, is Chrome blocking third-party cookies? No, it doesn't degrade GA4 attribution. There's no problem with that. Ad blockers do reduce the revenue track from Facebook Pixel, so that those ad blockers have been there all along. There's still a decent chunk of the internet, maybe 15% on average, that are not tracked at all through ad blockers. Safari and web browsers limiting first-party cookies. So it's not the third-party Google Chrome thing that you need to worry about this year. It's the first-party problems that are limited by Apple's browsers that are the problem. And this shorter cookie expiry degrades GA4 attribution. Now, this is a screenshot from that I don't agree with, because you see here they've they've neatly conflated two different things. On the left, the ITP is being phased out, or phased in. That's absolutely true, and we talked about that. But Google planning to phase out third-party cookies, and indeed doing so, has no impact on web tracking. Third-party cookies have not been used in web analytics for a decade, and it's really only sort of other ad networks that are suffering there. So, one of the things that Littledata absolutely can do, cookies or not, is basically improve the revenue tracking into the platform, and we can therefore guarantee server-side events into marketing platforms. We can reconcile and deduplicate with Shopify orders, and handling upsells, refunds, and cancellations. So that makes sure that the revenue number in Google or Meta or Klaviyo matches the revenue number in Shopify. However, there are also some things we can do to improve revenue attribution. This is the attribution being the problem of actually knowing how to split that revenue out into your marketing campaigns. So first of all, being able to have reliable JavaScript to track page views and UTMs. And in fact, we have a big release this week for our app embed, which should improve the way that we add that JavaScript onto the Shopify store, and means that we can capture more page views and UTMs. Secondly, by using our own domain, i.e. Shopify's first-party cookies for longer attribution window, Apple basically and Safari, they respect more if the cookie is set by the own domain, i.e. shopify.com, rather than googleanalytics.com. We have a clever feature we call the attribution boost, which basically stores up landing page URLs with the cart so that you can better attribute back orders that are purchased, even people who opted out of being tracked. And finally, and the latest feature we've launched, this has been true for Facebook for a while, but now we've launched it for Google, is sharing hashed customer data for non-cookie attribution. So that means that these platforms that have a big, what they call user identity graph, can actually link back to the ad or the campaign based not on the cookie and the expiry of that, but or non-expiry of that rather, but can link back based on the first-party customer data. And this is the transformational thing, I think, for the future of tracking on the web, is that we're going to stop, not that cookies are going to go away completely, but we have now another way of tracking based on the customer profile, the first-party customer data. So to put that in perspective, the cookie-based tracking is basically anonymous. You are assigned when you land on the website a random ID, and that random ID is persisted through your journey on the website, and that enables you to have session-based tracking, just knowing that the same page view is from the same one as previously, because by default the web the server doesn't know that, the web analytics server doesn't know that. But also user-based tracking, so being a same ID but across multiple sessions. Now, with identified attribution, what we can do is actually say, look, this person, because they've given us their email or because they've gone through the checkout and effectively logged in, we now know their email, their physical address, their name, and based on those attributes and their phone number, we can actually link them back to a profile on Facebook and Google. Those are really the only two platforms that are big enough to have the global user graph to be able to do this kind of attribution. But it is also true to some extent with other marketing tools, particularly CRM or email marketing tools that have customer records there. So, fundamentally, we're not doing what we call dubious tracking technologies. We're not doing CNAME cloaking. That's been ineffective for a while. We're not doing browser fingerprinting. We believe that to be phased out. It is being phased out. Apple's announced that, but also it just feels ethically wrong tracking someone who's asked to opt out. We're not doing audience sharing across brands. We're not using any third-party email lists. And we're not doing any sort of IP to email lookup, which is what some of our competitors do. So, we're trying to be on the right side of the fence when it comes to respecting the customer's privacy while giving the brand the ability to track their marketing. So, I think fundamentally, the way that you can identify customers on the website splits in two columns. As I said, there are basically two safe ways. One is UTM params and that via cookies to be tracked back to a order or a purchase. And the second way is this first-party customer data from Shopify that can be used to link to an actual account on the marketing platform. Pixel IDs, click IDs in the URL, CNAME cloaking, cookies, fingerprinting, other dark arts. These are all not safe in the sense that while they might work now, they're all transitional things that will fade away in effectiveness over the next few years. Whereas I don't believe UTM params or first party data is going away. That's a long-term solution. And so this fits into how Littledata has evolved our platform in terms of being able to support those growing number of marketing channels that allow us to do first-party data into their platform. As I said, Google Analytics is the last of those to sort of follow line. Google Ads actually has just launched that as well. They've enabled a kind of user import upload, but now they have actually a direct API to do that in real time. And obviously Klaviyo allows that because they have their own customer record to sync that with. So what's the future of customer attribution? I've talked about some of these points already, but just to share my view, I think we need to be able to track that whole customer journey. And if we're going to have a problem doing that via cookies or via anonymous tracking cookie, then we need to do it by first-party customer data where we can. Littledata provides this robust identity graph where we can be compliant with GDPR and CCPA while capturing a range of identifiers to try and bring back to an individual profile. And with Klaviyo, this is working incredibly well. What we're seeing is that customers are getting incredibly high ROI because what we can do is use that service identity graph to link back events to a personal email list, and therefore they can be targeted with an abandoned cart or a browser abandonment email at a much higher rate than with Klaviyo's default tracking. So this what we call this identity resolution is basically giving more retargeting potential by linking browsing to profiles. Currently, email is the best way to link a web session with profiles. So in Klaviyo, actually, it's really the only way. But they will be launching this year a sort of wider identity resolution where you can link people based off phone numbers and addresses, which again is kind of what Google and Meta are allowed to do as well. So I think the big questions that come up is, how can brands further use customer data in marketing, and how can brands identify customers early in the buying process? And I think this last one is critical because it's going to drive a lot of marketing tactics. If in fact your ability to market to the customer, to target them with smart personalized ads depends on knowing who they are, then you have a very incentive to make them kind of reveal themselves early in the buying process. Typically, customers didn't identify themselves until they got to checkout, but there's a number of ways, from discounts to market it to loyalty programs, etc., mobile apps, where you can get them to identify themselves when they're browsing, and that's becoming very valuable. So I think there are more marketing channels that you could track through, and these are all channels that have decent volumes of customers and on Shopify, and therefore a decent customer database that you can sync with. But I think also more mobile apps. I think we'll see the evolution of the Shop app is really interesting because there is a mobile app that Shop Pay has now hundreds of millions now of user accounts where people have saved their payment details. It'd be really interesting to see where Shopify evolves that into a true sort of actual in-app shopping experience. And actually that identity that Shopify have, they could share with brands as a way of helping to target their other marketing. So I'm interested to see where Shopify goes with that. Obviously, there's a whole new world there because they haven't traditionally been in this, a D2C app before. But I think it's certainly possible for them. They've got huge uptake of Shop Pay, which is driving the Shop app. So I'll stop there, and I hope that's been a useful talk for you. Obviously, I'm always open to questions. We have all our contact details are on LinkedIn and via the site. So please do, if you do talk to me if you have questions about Littledata, but also if more broadly just want to understand where the world of web analytics is going. I'm always interested to learn more. Well, thanks very much for listening, and we'll be back next week with another live